Hello, welcome to the Old Man's Cloth discussion. My name is Angela Morin, and I am here with
Mrs. Wyatt, and we're here to discuss Old Man's Cloth. And the artist is El Anatsui, which we had to look up, and we found that it was pronounced exactly like it's spelled. So that should be a little bit easier for you to be able to pronounce that when you have to. It is from the contemporary historical period. Materials and techniques. It is aluminum, flattened liquor bottle labels, and copper wire all put together. And you can see here up close how it's actually constructed. The intended purpose as to why it was made, it was meant to marry traditional African craft techniques with a more Western and contemporary medium. And the overall meaning suggests that Western control over African culture, which is kind of interesting. It's the whole idea of colonialism. Then we have for your patron, we don't have one, and the intended audience is a global audience.
So, number one is asking what the significance of the alcohol labels is. And really, eventually, alcohol became one of the items used in the transatlantic slave trade. So, he's kind of talking about this, like we said before, this Western control over African culture. And they did eventually, once the alcohol they made from rum in the West Indies took it to Liverpool and then made its way back to Africa. So not only did they take Africans to produce this alcohol, they also brought the alcohol back to Africa and traded it with the people that were still there. And he says that he had a that the bottle caps had a very strong reference to the history of Africa. Now, the word that in number two, what the U word gawu means is basically metal cloak. And when we look at this piece, let's see, there we are. When we look at this piece, you can see that even though it's made from aluminum and wire, it does very much resemble fabric. Three, how did the Metropolitan Museum of Art categorize this work, and what does this say about the perception of this piece by art historians? This is a really interesting part of the article. They talked about how the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City has two of Anatsui's metal wall hangings, but they're owned by two different curatorial departments: the Arts of Africa and the Oceania, and then the Americas. And and modern and contemporary art. There we go. They were even on display at the same time in two different galleries, but because of this, art historians are unsure of how to categorize his work, since it is both African with ritualistic properties yet contemporary.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not certain if this is a piece that should be labeled as contemporary or something that should be labeled as African. And a lot of the African art pieces that you see were not made recently.
No.
So what they have in the Metropolitan Museum of Art for the African art is not new stuff. So his piece is, it fits because it's African art and he uses kind of traditional styles, but it's also out of place because it's not really a traditional African piece. So in addition to that, there's other things that make it hard to place because it uses kind of traditional craft methods that are in. It's labeled sometimes as being a craft rather than fine arts.
Mm-hmm.
And so this piece just kind of teeters on the edge of what does it mean to categorize art and how do we categorize art? So that's about it. Unless you have anything else to add, Mrs. Lynn.
No, I think you've done an excellent job.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy.